out to North Platte, Nebraska, which is actually where my wife and I went early September. We went to Omaha actually, but we stopped here in North Platte for a day or two, coming and going, mainly to visit this Bailey Yard and the Golden Spike Tower. Why did they choose to call it the Golden Spike Tower? I mean, obviously the Golden Spike we all think of is out in Promontory, Utah, but they argue that this is, at least in terms of the UP system, one of the ways that east meets west, which is, of course, what Promontory Transcontinental Railroad was all about, east meeting west. So just this Golden Spike Tower is in where east meets west in terms of the Union Pacific Railroad. They get about 30,000 visitors a year at this location, and we'll see more of what it looks like here. In fact, there you go. There's the Golden Spike Tower to the left there. Up on the top, that's the 8th floor, is an enclosed observation area, and then right below it, the 7th floor of the tower is an open air observation. You can see the railing there, the open railing that if you want to get a view of the rail yard without any glass or anything for that matter getting in your way, that's the floor for you. And then down on the 1st floor is where you, of course, enter the building, the gift shop, the admissions. There's a lobby area, restroom. And as far as I know, there really isn't anything in between. I'm trying to remember the layout of the panel in the elevator to see if you could even go to a different level. Certainly the public can't. There may be something that's more private or storage or something the rest of the tower, but I didn't pick up on that, so to speak. And here's a further shot away from the tower and sign. Just kind of gives you an idea of what the entrance to the place looks like. The Golden Spike Tower, it's right there next to the Union Pacific Bailey Yard, but it is not part of Union Pacific Railroad. It's its own organization, a nonprofit, and it's overseen by a board of directors like most nonprofits are. There is one board always filled by a Union Pacific Railroad employee, just to keep, obviously, to keep their interest in the tower and keep the flow of information and so on. Apparently, they work pretty well with the Union Pacific people themselves, and they certainly rely to some degree on volunteers that come out of the railroad world, particularly retirees who worked at the Bailey Yard there and then spends an afternoon or two, a month or however it works, to talk with people on the top floor there, the enclosed 8th floor. There's almost always, as far as I understand, a docent up there who often is a retired Bailey Yard worker that's willing to chat with people about what's going on in the yard and so on and so forth. So here's another view. This is not my picture. I didn't have a drone the day I was there, but this gives you a better feel now for how the tower is placed in respect to the actual yard. This view is basically looking north. So the parking lot to the visitor center is on the south side of the actual visitor center and tower. On the north side of the tower is the parade of flags there, that little arc you can kind of see of state flags. And then in the distance closer to the horizon, you can see the actual rail yard, which extends to the left quite a ways, which is west, and also extends to the right quite a ways, which is east. So it's and there's no way I was going to get a picture of the whole thing with the lens that I have. My camera does not go nearly wide enough to get the whole thing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The whole thing is about 8 miles long, and you can see you're not more than a block or two from the midpoint, basically, kind of the midpoint. We're not exactly at the midpoint, but it's close enough that you're so close to it, there's no way you get wide enough to get the whole thing. And let's see, what else was I going to mention here? Oh, there's a dining car there you can see just to the right of the parking lot and the visitor center, that nice UP yellow. That dining car is being renovated. I think they hope to open it as a restaurant at some point, or at least a car that you can walk through and see how a dining car of that vintage would have looked and felt. They, by the way, opened in 2008. This Golden Spike Tower and Visitor Center opened in 2008. And that was about a decade plus from when the original idea surfaced in the 1990s. Getting from idea to actual opening took something over a decade. This is a shot I think I took as we approached the tower. I don't have that much of a zoom, so we weren't far away from where some of the locomotives were brought into a locomotive repair facility that we'll see later. That train of locomotives was on the move. You can see the rail worker there on the point of the train, moving to your left. Here's another shot of the tower, a little close up, front door of the visitor center. And you can see on the left-hand side the locomotives there on one of the closer tracks to us in the yard. And get a rough idea of how far away we are from the yard. And we'll get to see better pictures up from up on top too. This is the lobby gift shop. One of the first things, in fact, that's the ticket gal there on the right. One of the first things you see coming in. The whole operation basically funded by a couple of things. The admissions, and it wasn't very expensive. I don't remember exactly, but it certainly wasn't anything that would slow you down much. Gift shop sales, and you're basically looking at the gift shop. It's deep. You really can't see it all, but that's all the wider it is. Grants, private foundations, that sort of thing. Get, at least until 2029, the year 2029, they get 2% of the hotel stays. They get 2 points of the bed tax in North Platte area that was established apparently to help pay off the building loan initially, starting in 2008 roughly. So they get, what is that, 20 years of that income to help them get going. And I mentioned a loan to pay back. They got a USDA loan to build this facility in the first place. I'm not sure why agriculture. They're out in the middle of the farm fields, but I never read anything particularly about that loan. Also on this first floor, there's a lot of information that you can take time to read, various displays, and this gives you a idea of some of it. There's actually a lot more than just this, but there's quite a bit of information there on the first floor that you can take advantage of before you head up to look at the yard. And throughout the building, I think this was on the 7th or 8th floor, I forget, there's kind of a back hallway on the back side of the building from where you look out that you walk around in to get to the elevator and so on. And these types of signs and information spots were all around the both floors, 7th and 8th floor. Okay, here's where we're up on top. I think we started, as I recall, on the 8th floor, and you might be able to tell from some of the pictures that these are taken through glass. And then as the second half of my pictures, anyway, I'm not sure it works out to half and half here on this presentation, but was through the 7th floor observation deck, so there was not any glass in the way. It was a straight shot to the yard. So we are looking to the west from the tower here, and this engine workhouse is probably the southernmost thing on the Bailey Yard property. The main line comes in from the west up in the upper right-hand corner of this picture, goes by or through a hump yard, and here's the hump right here where the arrow is, and then off the picture to the right, the train and or car humped roll to the east and to the rest of the yard, most of which you can't see in this picture. There's 3 locomotive fueling and servicing centers on the eastbound run through, and there's 3 total, and there's some on the west and westbound trains too coming in from the east. The service track handles more than 8,500 locomotives a month, servicing and fueling and so on, and that repair shop can handle about 750 locomotives a month. Did I say 750 the first time? It should have been 8,500 a month that goes through the fueling and quick servicing, and then actual repairs is 750 a month roughly. And there's also a car repair facility that handles about 50 cars a day. I'm not sure where that is actually. And give you an idea of the activity of the car repair shop, they replace about 10,000 pairs of wheels each year. Okay, here we've backed the lens up a little bit on the camera so you can see a little bit more. You still have the engine house, engine repair shop on the left, but now you can see a little bit more of the yard. That entrance that I first pointed off, the earlier picture ended about right here. There's the top of the hump yard, and now we can see a lot more of the yard going to the east, but not a whole lot. There's still a whole lot left of that yard that you can't see in this picture. The yard covers about, here, I'll give you some stats here, just in case you can relate to this. It's pretty big. It's hard to actually imagine. It's on 2,850 acres. Which is about 4.5 square miles is what this yard covers. And it's about 8 miles in length from east end to west end, and almost 2 miles wide if you go from the southernmost point, which you're almost looking at here with the engine repair shop, and the northernmost point, which I'm not sure what that is. We'll see a picture in that direction, but I'm not real clear where it is. The yard has about 200 separate tracks, which total 315 miles of track. There's 985 switches, 766 turnouts, 17 receiving tracks, 16 departure tracks. There's about 2,600 employees that work in this yard, most of whom are responsible for the day-to-day operations. Okay, here's a little bit closer picture of basically the same direction we've been looking at here. We can see the trains coming in from the west along the top of the screen here. The hump of the hump yard in the upper right there with the 2 little buildings. Then in the lower left, some of that engine servicing and refueling, and then the engine repair house is off the picture to the left. So you can get a little bit close up of what's going on here. The locomotive, the quick service, you might say, is kind of done like a NASCAR pit deal, where you come right in. The trains, the locomotive still could have its train behind it. It goes into here, gets serviced, and out in 45 minutes. At least that's what I'm told. I didn't actually time one while we were there. Okay, obviously, but this gives you an idea of the size of the yard, and we'll look at an entire map here in a minute, but this gives you some idea. Okay, so to give you an idea of where we are here, in the bottom middle of the picture, where I'm kind of hovering with my cursor, that's where the Golden Spike Tower is. So that's right here is where we've been taking these pictures so far, and all the pictures that we've been taking so far were to the west, which is this way. There's the let's see, that would be the northern end of the engine repair house, right here. This white roof. So the quick service outdoor for the locomotives is right here. The top of the hump yard is over here. Then there's a lot of track coming in from the west to the left, and then there's all these tracks and all these tracks here, and then they all come together again at the east, and the east end is way to the right. So hopefully that gives you some idea. Some more stats while we're looking at this photo. 139 trains a day, representing about 14,000 rail cars every day. And they sort about 3,000 cars a day using the yard's two humps. There's one at each end. The eastbound hump is a 34-foot tall mound, and the westbound is shorter at only 20 feet. Shorter meaning less tall. And they can sort 4 cars a minute into the bowl tracks, which there are 114 of. There's 49 tracks for westbound trains and 65 tracks for eastbound trains. That's just amazing. Here's another view of it. This time, let's see if I can place myself. I think we're looking at the west end, which is in the lower right, and looking all the way down to the east end in the upper right. And this picture is old enough that the Golden Spike Tower is not yet here, so it must be before the 2000s or so. It doesn't even look like it's even under construction. Where we're taking all these other shots, the ones that I took, are from the Golden Spike Tower facility, which will be right here where I'm kind of circling with the cursor. So engine repair shop here, the quick through servicing for the bowl tracks for the hump yards, bunch of pass-through tracks, or I'm not sure exactly how this works, and a whole set of other tracks over here, and then out to the east. A little bit of history on North Platte. It was first set up as a railroad town originally by a chief engineer, Union Pacific, Grenville Dodge, who chose this location primarily because of the availability of good water. You can see the North Platte River over here, or somewhere up here anyway. I'm not sure if these are ponds or part of the river. And then there's the South Platte River too. On the south end, again, there's a body of water here. I'm not sure if it's part of the South Platte River or just a reservoir or a pond of some sort. But this whole area, including North Platte, the town itself, has the South Platte River on the south end and the North Platte River on the north end. A great water supply. The town was first known as Hell on Wheels, interestingly enough, and received its first train in 1866. And then Dodge constructed major shop facilities here, some winter quarters for crews. And by 1867, which is only a year later, it was conducting mainline operations through town. And the early yard was just a flat, simple 20-track yard, as opposed to however many tracks I said are here now. And that would have been roughly the late 1860s. I think this is our last aerial photograph. Once again, to give you a placement, at the picture is the west end of the yard. And so obviously at the top of the picture is the east end of the yard. The not yet existing Golden Spike Tower, where I've taken my pictures, will be right here where I'm circling around. There's the engine repair house. Here's the quick through servicing. So hopefully between those various aerial photos, you can get an idea of just how extensive this is. There's also a couple of, I put on here a couple of diagrams or layouts and more stats about what goes through here. Here's one of them, which I think is a little easy to read, but there'll be a second one here in a second that might, it's kind of yellow, but it might give you some additional information. North Platte became a division point, obviously, for the Union Pacific Railroad, where in addition to the stores are exchanged, the maintenance we've already talked about a little bit. The yard became a hump yard after World War II, 1948, and at the time had 42 tracks. And a second hump yard was added with 64 tracks in 1968. I was trying to see here if I could tell. I think you can tell if you study this map a little bit, which is where the hump tracks are, the bull tracks I mentioned, etc. The diesel locomotive shop came in 71, and the rail car shop came in 74. And then in 1980, that original hump yard was upgraded to 50 tracks. Let's see, what else data-wise? In 1995, this is kind of interesting, the Bailey Yard was recognized in the Guinness Book of Records as the largest rail yard in the world. And it was featured on the episode of Freight Trains, or on the Freight Trains episode of Modern Marvels on the History Channel as well. Whoops, there we go. Here's the other, I think it's the same map, but for some reason it was yellow, so I thought I'd give you both in case you wanted to look at it. I think the other one's a little easier to read. Okay, so now back to my photos, and we're still looking through glass. You can kind of see remnants of it at the top in the sky part. But anyway, now we've swung around now to where we're more looking closer to north, with west to the left, east to the right, and you can sort of see a little bit more of what's going on. You can see that coal train passing right through, apparently. Okay, back to the engine house. I must have just swung around taking that picture. There's another one like we've seen. I won't spend too much time on there. Somewhere along, there's another wide one. This is up in the 8th floor. In addition to looking out the window and talking to the docent, they do have some displays up there. This one happens to be about railroad gauges and how they're measured and all that sort of thing. So it is fun there are some fun things to learn and do up there other than just look out the window. Okay, now we're continuing to swing around, headed towards the east. So this is probably east of north now that we're looking to some degree. And now we continue to swing. We're getting a little closer to a shot down the east side, again from the tower. And I know this may be towards the end of these pictures. I don't know that I bothered getting any much further shot because much further and you're miles away, it really isn't very meaningful. Okay, this is back in the tower itself, where they have these various displays. And this display is a little model of an orphan train, of the Orphan Train. And as we noted on the advertising for this particular session, we're going to talk about a couple of, actually four things. One was to clearly railroad, the Bailey Yard Tower. Now we're moving into what I call the great acts of kindness that were one specifically very directly related to North Platte, and one that was more generally related to North Platte, but both railroad related. Now, the Orphan Train is the one that was more general, and railroad related. The Orphan Train, if you're not familiar with the story, which I wasn't particularly aware of it either, my wife, who was a school teacher, apparently read some Orphan Train books with her classes in 3rd and 4th grade. It's basically the story of well, I'll tell the story here in a minute. This is just to kind of show you what's in the tower for information-wise. The other story that we're going to talk about is the North Platte Canteen, which this sort of sets the stage for, again, a display in the tower. It's particular to North Platte, at least it was in terms of its World War II significance. Just another shot of some of the information panels that were available in the tower itself. Another shot of the yard. I think probably the reason I threw this in is by the time I took this picture, the hump yard was actually active. You can see 2 cars down here that are heading for the tracks that they were assigned to. There's 2 cars up here that just got let loose from the top of the hump. There's another about as wide as I could get, and it doesn't cover a whole lot of the facility. Oh, this was fun. Around the base of the tower are these flags. This picture was taken from the open air 7th floor, because that's where I could kind of lean out and get a shot basically straight down. There are 23 flags that circle about half of the dome, and they are the state flags of each of the states served by the Union Pacific Railroad. There's another shot out there with the hump yard being active. Here's looks like a reefer or box car coming down, a couple of tank cars starting to come down. This was basically directly below the tower, on the Union Pacific side of the lot line, quote unquote. That's probably some sort of maintenance or crew building there. And then this one right here. And then over here is some sort of tower, which you'll see a close-up to. I don't know if that was any kind of an original tower or what the purpose for that is. But here's, on the right here is a close-up of that tower as seen from the 7th floor of the Golden Spike Tower. And on the left, just happen to be next to each other, California and Colorado's flags for states served by the Union Pacific. They are, by the way, they are in alphabetical order around the base of the, halfway around the base of the tower. So it just happens to be that Colorado California are next to each other when it comes to alphabetically states served by UP. And here we can see kind of what that looks like from the ground. There's Wyoming. That's the last of the states coming this way. You can't see the first one, which is follow the line of flags around to the very bottom of the picture, and back behind that roof somewhere is Arizona. Arizona being the first of the state flags. I think we'll see that in a minute, actually. This is the backyard of the visitor center. It was not open when we were there. I'm not sure if that's because of a COVID thing or what, but you couldn't wander around back there. Obviously, there are fun things for kids to do, a few fun things for kids to do, maybe a picnic area. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was kind of cute. There you can see the flags, too. There's California and Colorado right there. And out front, the Union Pacific flag. Imagine that. Okay, we're shifting gears here. We're going to start talking about the two great acts of kindness that are related to North Platte, and well, certainly to railroading, and to some degree, but not all, North Platte itself. So this is a picture of and we're going to talk about first the North Platte Canteen. This picture was taken during World War II sometime, but and I think this was a December shot, or at least I'm going to start telling the story in December of 1941. I'm not sure, but anyway, what got this whole thing started, at least in terms of World War II, was the town heard that members of its own 134th, which is a Nebraska Army division, was going to go through North Platte. So goodies gathered up and baskets of cookies and gifts and so on. They were going to meet the train, say hi, give these gifts to the soldiers, and say goodbye. And this was all to happen on December 17th, 1941. So there you can imagine all the townswomen with their fruits and pastries and who knows what. And they stand on the platform, and for 3 or 4 trains in a row that day, troop trains do in fact come through, but none of them are the Nebraska 134th Division. But you know what? They gave their stuff until they ran out, presumably, to the boys that they met on the trains anyway. And then you have to think that they started wondering about when the 134th was coming through, and then they started wondering about how we're going to gear up again to do this. And then they began to think, well, why not gear up to do this a lot? Because anticipate the war was going to last a while, and there were going to be a lot of troop trains and so on. So in a week's time, this is December 17th, remember that well, not the picture, but December 17th was the first time they thought to do this when their own train was coming through, but it didn't. 1 week later, actually 8 days later, on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1941, the official North Platte Canteen, now organized, now ready to go, now basically has the whole support of the town, met its first train, and as we'll see, it lasted for quite a while. Here's another picture of what that looked like during World War II. This was inside the railroad depot, which is not next to the tracks anymore, by the way. Again, here's World War II vintage North Platte Canteen ladies with their baskets of goodies to hand out to the troops. Here's one of the signs along the way giving you some basic stats about it. The official opening, as we just described, Christmas Day 1941. They kept the program going through April of 1946. And by the time it was over, they had served over 6 million servicemen coming through on troop trains. I mentioned start during World War I, when the American Red Cross set up canteens, what they called canteens, the Red Cross canteens, across the country. And the first one they set up in Nebraska was in Omaha in 1917. The North Platte Red Cross Canteen opened up in 1918, and it stayed open for 10 months after the war ended, which was it closed in September of 1919. So they actually served a whole lot more of the World War I servicemen after the war had already ended, because they didn't get started till later, and it ended very soon. And in that effort, they say they served about 113,000 troops for World War I. Obviously paled in comparison, but it was first, and in many ways set the stage for the North Platte Canteen of World War II. Here's another picture, World War II vintage. And again, guys running to the train. Sadly, that railroad depot is not there anymore. There was some effort to save it. I don't know exactly when that happened. And there's like a lot of times with efforts like these to save a depot, getting permission or having to do that, or get it somehow or another okayed by the railroad, that it always has its ins and outs, and this one is not unlike those. There's stories of who did what to whom and blah blah blah, but the end of the story is that the depot was in fact demoed. There's a Veterans Memorial Park there in North Platte, and you can see the sign in the background of the picture. The statue here is of Ray Wilson, the woman who was the key organizer for the North Platte Canteen. She was there to greet the 134th, but the 134th that never showed up. Actually, I don't know if never is accurate. You have to think that at least at some point during the history of the canteen, the 134th did in fact go through. But now that I think about it, I don't remember that exactly happening. Oh, and by the way, if I don't think to mention it again, like most often with these talks, I'll have some links available for you on the web page, the Parlor Car Chat web page, including some books. There's a couple. There's one good book. There's another good book about the Orphan Train, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So in case that scoots your tutor, let's see, somebody said the dresses, the women are wearing summer dresses, so I don't think this was a December photo. Entirely possible. I really don't know date-wise when any of these photos were taken. So don't necessarily try to correlate the picture you're looking at with an exact date during either the World War I canteen, or I don't think I had any pictures of that actually. Most of the World War II canteen could have been any time during the canteen era, and then later on here too with the Orphan Train and with the the canteen, I guess I already talked about. So we'll not try to do these, or certainly an era, but not a specific date or even season. So that's Ray Wilson, organizer of the North Platte Canteen. Here's one. The picture obviously is dated, and it predates any of the part of the story that I know. Um, so here's a set of troops in 1898. So that's what, basically post-Civil War type period, somewhere between Civil War and World War One. Just FYI, I don't know really what's going on here. Here we are back to World War II canteen activities. This is, there's not a whole lot left of this in North Platte today, meaning the North Platte Canteen and its World War II activities, other than photos and books and posters and stuff like that you can learn at the museum. But a restaurant called the Canteen, which is, of course, in memory of it, but really has nothing to do with it. It's at the opposite end of North Platte from where the rail yard is and where the railroad depot was. But it's called the Canteen, so I thought I'd show you, Billy. Lynn and I ate there actually once, and it was probably the better meal that we had in North Platte. But North Platte is not a big town, at least certainly not as big as Colorado Springs is, it's not as big as Five Cities or San Luis Obispo either, and it doesn't have anywhere near the restaurant options and so on that either Colorado Springs or anywhere in San Luis Obispo has. So don't expect a whole lot of great amenity type stuff if you ever choose to visit North Platte. For the day is the Orphan Train, pictured here, obviously quite a while ago with wooden cars and that locomotive. All orphans lined up along the bottom, along the top, along the sides of this train. The orphan trains, which went all across the country, generally emanating from New York City or certainly East Coast, because it was a program of the Children's Aid Society of New York City. The program ran from 1854 till 1929, and in essence, the gist of it was there were lots and lots of homeless kids, orphan kids, in the East Coast, in New York City, and maybe other East Coast towns. I don't remember talking about them specifically. This Children's Aid Society took it upon themselves to try and find homes for them across the country, and many of them were moved, transported by rail. 200,000 of them, to be exact. And to give you an idea of just how many there were, particularly percentage-wise of the population, in 1850, right before the Orphan Train program began, the population of New York City was about 500,000, 500,000. Of that 500,000, 30,000 were homeless orphan-type children. That's almost 10%. What would it be? Well, around 7% of the whole population. That's huge. Back in this day, adoption was not nearly as it is today, or as it became sort of ramping up starting around 1900. So they weren't necessarily trying to find adoptive families. Places that basically will take these kids in. And in that kind of situation, placements didn't always work out so well. Something, there was a certain luck of the draw with the families and the kids get along well. But by and large, it probably did a whole lot more good than not good. This little chart gives you an idea of how many orphans made it to these various states during this program, 1854. Well, this map covers the period 1853 or 4 when the program started till about 1910. And as I told you, the program continued to 1929. So this is how many kids got transported up till about 1910. I'm not sure why it isn't complete. Maybe they stopped keeping records or they got confused or I don't know what. You notice that none of them went out to Alaska or Hawaii. But all the rest of the states except, who is that? Is that Arizona that is to the lower right of California there has 0, but everybody else has some positive number. Some quite large. Let's see, who's a record holder here? There's a 9,000 right there. That looks like Illinois. Oh, there's a 33,000 went out to New York. Well, I guess that makes sense. New York City was probably sending a lot of them just out to the outreaches of the state for a while. Okay, enough on that. Here's a picture from 1913. Some of what the orphans look like. There's orphans on the Orphan Train, headed who knows where. There's also, and again, there'll be links to this on the webpage eventually. Today, there's an Orphan Train Heritage Society that keeps records. I think they have a little museum. I forget where. And there's another group. There's actually 2 groups that attempt to memorialize this activity for posterity. This is an interesting picture. On the left, leftmost picture was taken around 1899 in Iowa, Stacyville, Iowa. And then the lower right picture, 1941, is some of the same kids from the 1899 now are adults, and in 1941, the lower right-hand picture. So that's kind of an intriguing set. I was not able to find anybody who attempted to identify who was who from one picture to the other, but still interesting nonetheless. There was a movie about the Orphan Trains. I'll have a link to it. There are books. I'll have a link to at least one of them, like the one that my wife used in her class when she talked about the Orphan Trains with her 3rd graders. And just to kind of round out North Platte, should you ever want to visit, there is this Veterans Memorial Park and Museum. Sure, it might be entirely open air. That's possible. We did not go over to that. There's also Cody Park with some clearly some railroad features to it. There'll be a link to the website for Cody Park on the website eventually, on the Parlor Card chat page, that is. Also, Buffalo Bill Cody and his Scouts Rest Ranch are at North Platte. It was this ranch to where Buffalo Bill came out for his Wild West shows by train or by wagon. And from 1941 to 1946, he was involved in canteen support, etc. Let's see, what else? Whoops, sorry, jumping around. I think that's all I have to say about that. Oh, another little factoid. Apparently, passenger service to North Platte was halted in about 1971 after 105 years of passenger service. So there aren't any rail passenger train stops in North Platte anymore. There certainly is in Omaha, and maybe somewhere between Omaha and North Platte, but I'm not sure about it. It's the Zephyr that runs through there, by the way, today. It runs from Chicago down to Omaha, over to through Nebraska and down into Denver, and then across to Salt Lake City and so on to the West Coast.